what is truth? And then what did Pilate do? When he asked Jesus, what is truth? What did he do? Do you remember? Huh? Pilate's standing there. Jesus is standing before him. And Jesus said, I come to bear witness of the truth. Pilate said, what is truth? Now think, what did he do after he said that? The very next thing he did, what did he do? Okay, he didn't wash his hands yet. But that's what he did later. He did that later, just to hedge his bets. But the very next thing he did, it was important. I'm asking the question because I want you to think through what happened next. He just walked out. Simple. He just walked out the door. So, Jesus is standing there in front of him. Jesus said, I come to bear witness of the truth. I'm here to explain truth to you. Pilate says to him, what is truth? Turns and walks out the door. Hello? Jesus just said, I'm here to explain truth to you. And Pilate turns and walks out. The point of this lesson this morning is to show you the questions the Jews had and to explain to you that everybody in the world has questions. But I want to say to you that there are answers to their questions. Some of you sitting here this morning have questions. I've had questions. I'm going to say there are answers to the questions, but the problem these Jews had, we're going to illustrate it, is the same problem people that you know, and maybe in some cases you yourself have, with the questions and the answers to the questions. Let's look at what we have here. Verse 20. The people answered and said, Thou hast a devil. Who goeth about to kill thee? Well, Jesus said, Why are you trying to kill me? And they're like, Who's trying to kill you? It said a few verses before that the Jews were looking to kill him. And he's looking at them in the face and saying, Why do you want to kill me? And they're like, Who wants to kill you? This is a question of denial. It's often what people will, that's a first defense mechanism. Have you ever gotten into an argument with somebody and they said something to you and you really were covering fast and you were backing up, just covering your tracks as quick as you could? The only thing you could do was ask a question back? That's called a defense mechanism. I don't want to admit this, so we're going to redirect. It's called manipulation, right? You know, do this. Help. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So it's denial. It's really denial. The question, they did not want to know the answer. Okay, so let's say, here you are. Jesus is standing there. He's looking at Pharisee number one, who has planned, is figuring out how to get Jesus killed. Okay, Jesus probably looked straight at the number one guy because he knew who had probably met the night before with a bunch of other guys, and they talked about how to kill Jesus. So he goes right to the source, looks him dead in the eye, and says, Why are you trying to kill me? That guy knows what he had done. He answers, Who wants to kill you? And then changes the subject. He doesn't want to know the answer. Because if he'd have stopped for a minute, Jesus would have said, Well, how about you? You're the one. Excuse me. The second question I see in verse 25, and then said some of them in Jerusalem, Is not this he whom they seek to kill? But lo, he speaketh boldly. Here they're trying to validate, trying to find validation for their opinion. They're beginning to see that Jesus was different. And so they look at each other and say, Wow, this is great. Isn't this the guy? Is this the guy? Is this the one we should be looking for? I wonder if we should be looking, is this the one we should be listening to? I wonder, wow, that's a great church. I wonder, we should probably go to church. Shouldn't we go to church? Yeah, maybe we should someday. Yeah, it's a question. They're still distancing themselves from the answer. Still not interested in getting the answer. Right? Should we? Shouldn't we? They're interested in the question. They want to talk about the question, but all they want to do is just bat their gums. They really don't want the answer to that question. Verse 31. Many of the people believed on him and said, when Christ cometh, will he do more miracles than these which this man hath done? They're wondering at his works, knowing in their hearts that he was special. They're saying, wow, this has got to be the real deal. Doesn't it? Isn't this the real deal? Wow. God's got to be, man, God must really be doing something, you think? Right? An amazement, but still not interested in the answer. Verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go, that we shall not find him? I know. He's going to go to the Gentiles. But see, now they've got it all figured out. He says, I'm going to go somewhere, and you can't follow me. So they're saying, well, where could he go that we couldn't follow him? We can't go to the Gentiles, which was exactly what they were supposed to be doing. They were supposed to be taking the message of God to the Gentiles. That was the whole purpose for Israel. Israel's whole purpose was to bring the message of God to the world. Like, he's going to go to the Gentiles. That's what it is. See, what they've done is now they've normalized the whole thing, taken the Spirit completely out of it, and humanized Jesus' comments. They've turned it into a whole human experience. Listen, I want to tell you something. One of the biggest problems we have in most of our churches today is when you go to church, in many, many, many churches across this land this morning, what you're going to hear is a self-help message, and it's going to be human. It's going to be about being a better you, or something like that. Let me tell you something. Jesus' point was not to make you a better you. Jesus' point was to connect you with your Creator. He's the only one that knows God the Father. He's the only one that understands the mind of God the Father. He's the only one. I was looking at some pictures this morning of the universe. And there's this one galaxy or some kind of configuration out there that looks like a giant eyeball. Have you seen it? It's got an iris in it, and it's got the white part of the eye, and then it's got the shape around the eye. It looks just like it come right off of somebody's face. I mean, it's billions of miles across, and it just looks like an eye. It's creepy. Looks like an eye staring right at you. And all it is a formation of stars. Thinking, feel like God's looking at you. And I got to thinking about it. My imagination kind of went crazy. And I got to thinking about God just kind of peeling back the layers of the universe and peeking at us, looking at us like that, you know. And I thought again, how big is God? And how you can't wrap your head around how big He is. There's no way to understand how. And Jesus is the only one. He said, I came from Him in this passage. He said, I know Him. I know who He is. I came from Him. I'm going back to Him. Jesus is the embodiment form of God the Father. In Him dwelleth the fullness of the Godhead bodily. He's the only human that can understand the vastness of God. And there He was standing in the middle of them. And they didn't get it. They didn't listen. They're curious. Look at verse 41 again. Others said, this is the Christ. But some said, shall Christ come out of Galilee? Again, they didn't really know the answer to their questions. They never bothered to find out where He was actually from. And therefore, when the went full circle in their opinions, dismissing Him is inconsequential to their lives. They're questioning. One question leads to another question, to another question, to another question. And they're back now to full circle. I think there's a misspelling in there in case you didn't notice it. I said when and I meant went. But they completely came back to the bottom end where they said again, this couldn't be the Christ because he's from Galilee. How many of them knew he was from Bethlehem? If you remember Matthew chapter 2, didn't the scribes and Pharisees go search out to find where this child had been born? And didn't they discover he was born in Bethlehem? They already knew this. And all they had to do was question. They had to find out. You guys, most of you never met me till I was almost 50 years old. You don't know where I came from. A little bit of search and you can find out where I came from. You could hunt it out. One of the questions I get all the time is, are you from Mattoon? My answer is yes, now. But I wasn't originally. Yes, I'm from Mattoon. I am a Mattoon person now. But you know what I'm saying. But a little search you could find out. If you ask me, I'll tell you. They never stopped to ask the right question. All they're saying is, boy, couldn't be him. He's not from Bethlehem. He's from Galilee. Couldn't be him. Not enough interest to follow the question out. Now, I put all these points down here, and I told you I really have one point that I want to give you. And that's what I want to talk about the rest of the time. I wanted to show you these questions. And I want to tell you that there's some of you here in this room and maybe listening online that have a lot of questions about God. In fact, I would venture to say that some under the sound of my voice are questioning the existence of God because you come up with these questions that have no answers. You come up against this wall and you're like, well, I don't even know how to answer that. I can't. And so you table it, pigeonhole it, walk away. Say, okay, I'm a Christian. I think I'm a Christian. I'm trying to follow God, but boy, there's just this stuff that I just can't wrap my head around. My wife bought me a book I've been reading. It's called Through My Father's Eyes by Franklin Graham, written about his father, Billy. Really, really interesting. In the book, he makes a statement. He said when he was a young preacher, a lot of guys were coming to him with philosophical questions, and he couldn't answer them. So one day he took his Bible, and he laid it down on the altar, and he said, Lord, I can't answer all these questions. But I'm going to take what you said in here by faith, and I'm going to live my life based entirely on what this book says, and I'm going to say, whatever the Bible says, that's true. If I don't understand it, I'm going to live my life that the Bible, I'm not going to waffle between two opinions. I'm done with that. Here it is. This is what it says. I'm going to believe it. I remember a point in my life when I did the exact same thing. When that happened, when I decided, okay, this is true, I found out something. It's like this chair. I believe it was Voltaire. He was an atheist. I believe it was him that said, I believe that chair will hold me. I know it's a chair, but it really does me no good unless I decide to sit on it. When I decide to sit on it and put my full trust in it, then I experience what the chair is like. Wow. Probably the smartest thing the guy ever said. The truth is, when it comes to believing in Jesus Christ, believing in God, that's exactly what faith is. You can look at God and you can say, well, I believe there's a God. Yeah, Jesus came to earth. Okay, was he God? Wasn't he God? Well, look at the evidence. And when you see the evidence, decide in your life that you're going to sit down on that chair. And whatever God said, God said it. I believe it. That settled it. What will happen when you decide that is God will fill you with faith like you've never known before. Faith that is completely inexplicable. And the Bible will come alive to you in ways it never came alive to you before. As long as you spend your life stirring about with questions that have no answers, you're going to spend your entire life frustrated and upset. Now, let me take you back to 1 Timothy. Zach and I have talked a lot about them. Wyatt, we've talked a lot about this lately, haven't we? These verses. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, it says, verse 3, "As I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine." Watch this, verse 4. "Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in faith, so do." Look at that. "Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which do what? They minister questions, rather than godly edifying." Recently, we went through a study on Wednesday nights. We went through all the epistles, one epistle a night. It was really fun to do. We enjoyed it so much. And my son said to me, "You know, I noticed something in every one of those epistles. It has something about this. Stay away from questions that have no answers." There are a lot of questions that have no answers. I want to ask you something. If you could understand God, could you run the world? Lucifer thought he could. He thought he understood where God was and who God was and what God was. He thought he did. And he decided, I'm going to be like God. I got this. Didn't take long, and he found out he couldn't. You think about the millions and millions of people who got orders every breath. You think about the stars and the planets and the galaxies. You think about all the things God's created, the fishes of the sea. Some of the stuff that's down there is absolutely amazing. I noticed the other day, scientists are really caught up with some kind of new species they found that's kind of half porpoise, half whale, and they think it's a hybrid of some kind, and they found it off the coast of California, and they can't figure out what it is exactly, and they're filming it, and it's hanging out with the porpoises, but it looks like a whale, and they're not sure what it is. You know what? If you would go down, dive into the ocean, and you start studying things, that you'd be surprised at what kind of animals there are. I mean, really, if you get out the microscope and you start looking at some of these animals, unbelievable. Last night, my wife and I were sitting in the backyard, and all of a sudden, this little hummingbird came out. We get this hummingbird. He comes around, and I've never seen in my life, never seen a hummingbird stop. But we were watching him, and for some time, he'd just sit on a tree, just sit down, sit there for a little bit. We tried getting a picture of him, zooming in, but you can't. Little boogers are so tiny. We were standing in the dining room the other day, and this little hummingbird just come up right to the window of the door and just flew right there and looked in at us. I'm like, well, hello there. And he went away, and he came back, and he said, what's going on in there? You know, he's just kind of like watching us. Came up that far from the glass. It was the neatest thing. You take those hummingbirds and try to figure out how they fly. Some of the microscopic, there are these bugs, unbelievable bugs, that have inside of them, they're little tiny bugs, they have a little gear system, looks like gears inside of them, that sends out some kind of a defense, it's a defense mechanism, and it looks just like the inside of a machine. You can only see that with microscopic vision. You have to look at them through a microscope. You see this little gear system. Unbelievable. Some of the animals, the creatures in the world are just mind-blowing. Pick anything biological. Pick the flowers. the variety of flowers, all the different kinds of flowers there are, and how the colors are there, and how the insects interact with those flowers. Oh, there's a peony. I think if I remember correctly, my botany classes, I remember that that a peony has to have an ant to open it. That it cannot open on its own. That it will die if it doesn't have ants. I hate ants. Consider the ant thou sluggard, and find a way to kill it. No, that's my addition. I hate all those creepy crawly things. Of course, it could have something to do with when I was in Mexico one time. I sat down on a pile of fire ants. That was not a very good experience. And once I was in Georgia, and I had a fire ant crawl inside this ear and bite me on the eardrum, crawl in this ear and bite me on the eardrum. And then I had to fly in an airplane, and inside of my head was like, whoo! So I hate ants. They start crawling around. I'm like, shoot those things. By the way, I found out there's a new fly killer. Has anybody seen it? It's a gun they sell at Rural King. You put salt in it, and I just saw it in operation. You pump it up, and the fly comes, and you shoot them with salt. It's the greatest thing. When I was a teacher, I taught fifth grade science for a while, among other things. But while I was teaching fourth and fifth grade boys, I remember sitting at my desk, and the flies were just bothering me. So I took one of those little Nerf guns, took the ball off of it, and put a square of cardboard, glued it on the end, and I would sit and shoot flies while the kids were doing class, you know. And I was a fun teacher, I'm just going to say. No. Nah. That's a great idea, shooting flies like that. Now, how do I get off on that? Here's the thing. All the things that God has made, you can't understand how they're all made and how they function. It's not even possible. The mind of God is so much broader than we can even imagine. Landon, you work with computers all the time. The brain is a supercomputer that it blows the socks off of anything man can produce. Right? Unbelievable, the things that it can process at one time. Unbelievable. You think about just the movements that I'm making here, almost completely involuntarily. My brain is sending signals through my blood system every second that I move my hand, telling my fingers what to do, and God orders every bit of that. There is absolutely no human way possible for you to even come close to understanding the mind of God. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. As high as the heavens are from the earth, so are His thoughts above our thoughts and His ways above our ways. It's not even possible. So what you need to do is put all of the questions that have no answers to the side. And look at the questions and find answers to the questions that have answers. You're going to come back to Jesus. It is the cross that is the intersection between us and God. And I don't mean that in a polite little euphemism. I mean literally, the cross is where we meet God. When we recognize that the Bible explains us, explains us, and it tells us that we are sinners, and it explains our sinful nature. When we get that point, and we come before God and we say, I am a sinner, I understand I'm a sinner, I cannot save myself. When we get to that point, He says, look to the cross. When you look to the cross, you find Jesus hanging on the cross. Who is Jesus? When you look through the Bible and you try to find, you can research Him. You can find out who Jesus was. That you can find out. Oh my goodness. Who was it that wrote that book, In Search of Christ? He was an editor for the Chicago Tribune. Lee Strobel. Editor for the Chicago Tribune, and he decided, his wife became a Christian, and he decided he was going to prove that Christianity was wrong. So as a journalist, he set out to prove that Jesus was a hoax. In the end, Lee Strobel became a Christian. Didn't take him very long. He could not deny the mounting evidence. He filled chalkboards with answers and questions and just sought out Jesus. Who was Jesus? In the end, he became an evangelist, and he's still alive, still preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. He wrote these books, In Search of Christ, In Search of Faith, I think it is. They just recently came out with a movie about his life. Unbelievable how God just changed his heart. But why did God change his heart? How did God change his heart? One thing. He looked at Jesus. He looked at that man hanging on the cross, and he decided to find answers to the questions he could find answers to. Wow. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. There are more questions than you have even thought up yet. You're struggling with questions in your life? Stop. They always say, it's not the things I don't understand in here that bother me, it's the things I do understand. You know what? Every time I've wondered, I've gone back to the fact that, boy, everything this says about me is true. And then I look at those things and I understand them, and I decide to put my faith and trust completely in Jesus Christ, and suddenly other answers start being revealed. Because when you find yourself sitting down on the chair because you've chosen to put your trust and faith in that chair, suddenly you begin to experience what it feels like to sit in that chair. And I want to tell you something. That's where praise and worship billows out of your soul. Because suddenly when you've put yourself completely, your faith and trust completely in Jesus Christ, and you begin to experience who He is and what He is, then you understand faith, and God, by the Holy Spirit, teaches you things you never could imagine. He peels back the layers and lets you see into the heavenlies, and you begin to understand things that you never understood before. Okay? Well, that's the lesson for today. A couple minutes early. Go get you some coffee, all right?